The exhaust fumes tasted metallic on Min's tongue, mixing with the damp chill of late October air. Hanoi. Even after 3 years, the city felt like a vast, indifferent machine, all roaring engines, glaring neon, and the constant press of bodies. And he, Min, was just another small cog, spinning through its chaotic streets on his battered motorbike, a thermal bag strapped behind him like a second shadow. Another night shift. Another frantic race against time, delivering steaming bowls of pho or maybe flimsy boxes of lukewarm pizza to people he'd never meet again. He'd come from Yanbai province, a place carved out of mountains and mist, where life moved to the rhythm of the seasons, not the relentless ticking of a delivery app clock. Poverty there wasn't just a word, it was the rough texture of his father's hands, calloused from decades coaxing life from reluctant soil. It was the worry etched deep in his mother's eyes, lines that deepened the year his younger sister fell ill, the year the crops failed, the year the debt collectors started visiting their small, wood-smoke-scented home. Getting into the prestigious University of Information Technology in Hanoi, well, that wasn't just a dream come true. It was meant to be the escape route. The lever to pry his family out from under the weight of generations of hardship. His parents hadn't cried tears of joy when the acceptance letter arrived. No. His mother had wept silently, shoulders shaking, the fear palpable. How could they possibly afford 4 years in the capital, this glittering, expensive beast of a city? Min understood. Oh, he understood completely. The weight of their sacrifice settled onto his own young shoulders, heavier than any delivery bag. So, from his first year, the pattern was set. Lectures and coding labs filled the daylight hours, a world of algorithms and abstract logic. But when dusk bled into the sprawling city sky, Min became a shipper. A phantom flitting through the labyrinthine alleys, fueled by cheap instant noodles and an unwavering sense of family responsibility. Rain or shine, sweltering humidity or the bone-chilling damp of winter, it didn't matter. He rode. There were nights the wind cut through his thin jacket like razors, his fingers numb on the handlebars, the cold seeping into his bones. But quitting? Unthinkable. Every dong earned was meticulously accounted for. A portion sent home, a lifeline back to Yanbai. The rest stretched thin to cover rent in a cramped shared room, tuition fees, and the bare minimum for food. Sleep was a luxury, often stolen in fragmented hours between shifts and study sessions. He wasn't unaware of the sideways glances from classmates, their easy laughter, their weekend plans that didn't involve dodging traffic until 3 a.m. Min possessed a quiet intensity, a lean frame forged by constant motion, dark eyes that sometimes held a weariness far older than his 21 years. Girls sometimes tried to talk to him, drawn perhaps to his reserved nature or the hint of something brooding behind his polite smiles. He always demurred. The future, the heavy weight of expectation, had to come first. There was a sensitivity about him, too, something he rarely acknowledged. A tendency to notice the flicker of emotion in a stranger's eyes, an odd resonance with the city's shifting moods, a feeling sometimes that the veil between the seen and unseen was thinner for him. Just fatigue, he always told himself. Just the strain of too little sleep. This particular night felt heavier than usual. A persistent drizzle slicked the streets, reflecting the city lights in distorted, shimmering pools. The air was cold, carrying the scent of wet concrete and frying onions. He'd just dropped off an order near the old quarter, the confirmation pinging softly on his phone mount. He paused, stretching his aching back, the weariness settling deep. Just a few more hours. He could do this. He had to. He checked his phone again, swiping away condensation. Another notification blinked insistently. A new order. Milk tea and some kind of pastry, destination marked as the Lotus Inn boarding house, over in a district he didn't often frequent. The name sounded vaguely genteel, almost out of place for the usual late-night student haunts. Just another delivery, he thought, another fare closer to easing his parents' burden. He couldn't have known this particular order would unravel his reality. The notification chimed, displaying an address he hadn't visited before, the Lotus Inn boarding house, over in a district known for its crumbling colonial architecture and shadowed alleyways. The name itself seemed to hold a strange mix of elegance and decay. Just another fare. Minh swiped accept, kicked the motorbike back to life, its sputtering engine momentarily disrupting the damp quiet. The 20-minute drive stretched, pulling him away from the familiar main roads into a warren of narrower streets where streetlights grew scarcer, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe just beyond his headlight beam. Buildings leaned inwards, their facades stained with time and neglect, windows like vacant eyes staring down at him. An eerie atmosphere clung to the air here, thick and cloying, different from the usual nighttime energy of Hanoi. He felt a prickle of unease, that sensitivity he usually ignored stirring within him. Ridiculous. Just tired. Finally, he found it. The Lotus Inn. It might have been grand once. Ornate iron gates, now rusted and slightly askew, guarded a weathered stone archway. Beyond it, the building itself loomed, larger than expected, its paint peeling, intricate carvings obscured by grime. A single, weak bulb flickered above the entrance, doing little to dispel the gloom. It felt less like a boarding house and more like a place holding its breath, waiting. He parked the bike, the engine's silence amplifying the unsettling quiet. No sounds of traffic reached here, only the persistent drizzle and the distant bark of a dog. Taking the delivery bag, milk tea sloshing gently inside, a small box of mochi beside it, Minh pushed through the gate and stepped into a long, covered corridor. Dim fluorescent tubes overhead buzzed and flickered erratically, plunging sections of the hallway into momentary darkness before stuttering back to sickly life. His footsteps echoed unnervingly on the worn tile floor, each step sounding too loud in the heavy silence. Doors lined both sides, all closed, none showing any light from beneath. It felt deserted. Cold. He found the room number from the order, took a breath, and knocked lightly. Delivery. Silence answered him. He waited a beat, then knocked again, a little louder. Still nothing. Was this a prank order? He hated those. Wasted time, wasted fuel. Just as he was about to turn away, curse his luck, a soft voice drifted through the wood. So soft it was almost lost in the rain's whisper. Leave it there. I'll come out. The door creaked open a few inches, spilling a sliver of pale, yellow light into the corridor. A hand, slender and almost translucent, reached out. Then the door opened wider, revealing the girl inside. Minh froze, momentarily stunned. She was beautiful, but in a way that tugged at something sorrowful within him. Fragile beauty. Her long, dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, framing a face that was strikingly pale, her eyes large and shadowed, holding a profound, indescribable sadness. She wore a simple, knee-length nightgown, looking utterly out of place in the decaying grandeur of the Lotus Inn. A strange feeling washed over Minh, something beyond simple appreciation, a flicker of recognition. No, that wasn't it. Something else. Something unsettling he couldn't name. Thank you, she murmured, her voice as soft as her first words, clear but carrying an unnerving chill, like the damp wind outside. It's awful weather. I appreciate you bringing this. Minh managed a small, friendly smile, shaking off the odd feeling. It's okay. Part of the job, we get used to it. His gaze briefly caught on a university sweatshirt, his university's logo, hanging neatly on a hook inside the sparsely furnished room. Hey, you study at the University of Information Technology? A flicker of surprise crossed her pale features, replaced by a faint, hesitant smile. Yes. You too? Yeah. Third year, software engineering. Second year, she replied, her smile warming slightly, erasing some of the chill. Computer networks. They exchanged a few more words, the shared connection a small, unexpected island of normalcy in the strange atmosphere. Her name was in, she told him. Then Minh glanced at his watch. Duty called. Well, it's late. Got to run, or the next order will be cold. He offered another smile. Thanks, and nice meeting you. And reached for the bag, her fingers brushing his. Cold. So cold. As Minh turned to leave, a flicker of movement in the dim room behind her caught his eye. Or, did it? Just a shadow, maybe. But his tired brain processed it, shaped it into something definite for a split second. Another figure, standing further back in the room, indistinct, draped in white, long hair obscuring. He stopped, halfway turned, the question tumbling out before he could think better of it, just a casual, automatic query learned from countless shared student meals. Oh, hey, you only got one milk tea. Your friend doesn't want anything. And froze. The fragile warmth vanished from her face, replaced instantly by stark white. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating, a sudden, sharp fear mixed with something that looked almost like anger. Friend? Her voice was sharp, brittle. What friend? I'm here alone. There's no one else here. The air in the corridor seemed to drop 20 degrees. The flickering lights buzzed louder. Minh's heart hammered against his ribs. He instinctively glanced past her into the small, tidy room. Empty. Just the bed against the wall, the desk, the hanging sweatshirt. No one. Absolutely no one. Had he imagined it? The weariness, the strange atmosphere of the Lotus Inn. Oh, he stammered, taking a step back, his limbs suddenly feeling heavy, cold. Sorry. Must be seeing things. Tired. He didn't dare ask again. The denial had been too fierce, too absolute. My mistake. Sorry, I should go. Yes, she whispered, her voice tight, fear still radiating from her like a physical force. Be careful going home. The door clicked shut, the sound sharp and final in the echoing silence. Minh walked quickly, almost ran, back down the flickering corridor, the sound of his own shoes chasing him. He didn't look back, but the image of N's terrified, pale face, and the unsettling certainty that he had seen something else in that dimly lit room, it burrowed under his skin. He dismissed the image, blaming fatigue, but the chill lingered, a premonition clinging to him like the damp night air. That single, unsettling encounter was merely the opening act. The chill from the Lotus Inn didn't fade with the night. No, it seemed to follow Minh, a persistent, icy residue clinging to his skin, weaving itself into the fabric of his days and the increasingly fractured tapestry of his nights. He tried to dismiss the encounter with the unsettling feeling, that fleeting glimpse of something behind her. Fatigue, he told himself again. Stress. The eerie atmosphere of that decaying boarding house playing tricks on an overworked mind. Logical explanations. Except the strange occurrences didn't stop. They began subtly, insidiously. Little things. A sudden, inexplicable cold spot brushing against his arm as he navigated the Hanoi traffic. The distinct feeling, sometimes, of extra weight settling briefly on the back of his motorbike seat, only to vanish when he risked a glance. Fleeting shadows that danced in his peripheral vision, always gone when he turned to look. And sometimes, faint and unexpected, the scent of night-blooming jasmine in places it couldn't possibly be. He tried harder to ignore it. Focused on his coding assignments, the endless stream of deliveries. But the denial shattered one rain-lashed night around 11. He'd pulled over under a dripping awning to check his phone, wiping rain from the screen. A quick glance up into his rearview mirror. Routine check. But reflected in the small, vibrating rectangle wasn't just the slick street behind him. No. Sitting silently on his pillion seat was a figure. A girl, draped in a simple white garment, her long black hair plastered wetly across her face, obscuring everything but the curve of a pale cheek. Frozen. Minh's blood turned to ice water. His breath hitched. It was impossible. He blinked, parts slamming against his ribs like a trapped bird. Still there. Motionless. He whipped his head around, a strangled cry escaping his lips. Nothing. Empty space. Just the rain drumming on the metal roof above, the wind whipping his thin jacket. He nearly dropped the bike, hands shaking uncontrollably. Just dizzy. Seeing things again. But the image was seared onto his retinas, sharp and terrifyingly real. He fumbled with his keys, engine roaring to life, and sped away, not caring where he was going, just needing distance. Sleep offered no escape. It became a portal to a recurring landscape of dread. The nightmares began. Not straightforward terrors, but fragmented, surreal journeys through distorted versions of Hanoi's alleys. He'd be on his bike, delivering food that felt strangely heavy, knocking on doors that warped and changed shape. Sometimes the doors wouldn't open. Sometimes they'd swing wide into empty, cavernous rooms. But always, somewhere within the dream, reflected in a puddle, standing half-hidden in a doorway, sometimes just outside his field of vision but felt, was the girl in white. Her face remained indistinct, shrouded by hair or shadow, but her presence radiated an unbearable coldness. And the whisper, relentless, seeming to come from inside his own head, "Minh, save me." He'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, heart pounding fit to burst, the clock face inevitably showing some ungodly hour past 3 a.m. The plea echoed long after he was awake. Save her from what? The psychological distress mounted. The constant fear, the chronic insomnia, it began to take its toll. Dark circles, like bruises, bloomed beneath his eyes. He lost weight he couldn't afford to lose. His concentration frayed. In lectures, the professor's words blurred into meaningless sounds. His coding, usually meticulous, became riddled with errors he couldn't spot until it was too late. Friends noticed. "Minh, you look terrible," one classmate commented, concern in his voice. "Everything okay?" Minh forced a smile, mumbled something about exam stress. He started avoiding people, the effort of pretending normalcy too exhausting. The weariness was a physical ache now, a constant companion. He tried limiting his night shifts, avoiding routes that took him near the Lotus Inn, but the tuition deadline loomed. One particularly grim evening, navigating down Tran Hung Dao Street through a haze of drizzle and exhaust fumes, he pulled over to confirm an order. The streetlights cast weak, yellow cones of light. As he fumbled with his phone, he heard it, the soft slap-slap of bare feet on wet pavement behind him. He spun around, dread coiling in his gut. There, just a few yards away, half illuminated, stood a figure. Female. Long dark hair. Wearing something pale, maybe white. He couldn't see her face clearly in the gloom. But it was enough. A raw scream tore from his throat. He jammed the bike into gear, accelerating wildly, swerving violently and nearly plowing into a parked car. He didn't look back. That night, back in his small, rented room, he locked the door, bolted it, wedged a chair under the knob. Turned off all the lights. Crawled under his thin blanket, shaking like a leaf. Useless rituals. An hour later, it came. A soft, hesitant knocking. Tap, tap, tap. Slow. Deliberate. On his door. His blood ran cold. He lay frozen, barely breathing. It stopped. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. It took him nearly an hour to work up the courage to even look. He crept to the door, peered through the peephole. Empty hallway. He slowly, trembling, unbolted the door, opened it a crack. Nothing. But then he looked down. There, on the dusty tile floor inside his room, just across the threshold, was a single, small, perfect footprint. Barefoot. And unmistakably wet. The next morning, his landlady, Mrs. Lean, a stern but usually fair woman, stopped him in the hallway. "Minh," she began, her brow furrowed, "did you have a visitor late last night?" "A girl?" Minh stared at her, unable to speak. Mrs. Lean lowered her voice, glancing nervously down the corridor. Only asking because, well, I couldn't sleep. Went to get some water around 2 a.m. I saw a young woman standing outside your door. Just standing there. Long hair covering her face. Wearing white. Gave me a proper fright, she did. That was it. The final shred of rational explanation disintegrated. He wasn't just tired. He wasn't imagining things. This ghostly apparition, this paranormal activity, it was real. It was focused on him. And it wasn't stopping. He started losing his appetite, the mere thought of food nauseating. Sleep became impossible, closing his eyes only invited the nightmares, the chilling whisper. Save me. I'm so cold, buried somewhere. Utter desperation began to claw at him. One night, staring at his own haunted reflection in the darkened windowpane, the pressure became unbearable. He clenched his fists, tears of frustration and terror stinging his eyes. Who are you? He screamed, his voice cracking, hurling the words at the empty room, at the shadows that seemed to deepen in the corners. What do you want from me? Leave me alone. The only answer was the mournful howl of the wind outside his window, sounding chillingly like a sob of despair. He was trapped in a waking nightmare, the pleas of the unseen echoing in his mind. He didn't know how much more he could endure, nor did he realize the ghost's desperation was about to force his hand. He was trapped in a waking nightmare, the pleas of the unseen echoing in his mind. He didn't know how much more he could endure. Days bled into sleepless nights. Food tasted like ash. His reflection showed a gaunt stranger with haunted eyes. The university sent a stark email, tuition fees were past due, registration for the next semester was at risk. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog of his exhaustion. He needed money. Now. He'd sworn off late shifts, sworn off the parts of the city that felt wrong, but desperation gnawed at his resolve. Just one more night, he told himself. A few more deliveries. Enough to scrape together the first installment, buy himself a little more time. He forced himself back onto the bike, the engine sputtering in protest, mirroring his own reluctance. The rain had returned, a thin, persistent drizzle that blurred the already chaotic city lights. He slogged through several routine deliveries, the motions automatic, his mind numb. He was about to log off, call it a night, when the app flickered oddly. The screen blinked, then refreshed, displaying a new order. A large fried rice combo. Destination, Lotus Inn boarding house. Room 7. Anne's room. A jolt went through Minh, electric and cold. No. Absolutely not. He reached to reject it, his finger hovering over the screen. But then, something shifted within him. A strange calm, unnervingly serene, descended over the panic. A quiet insistence. Go. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, more a deep, undeniable pull, a current dragging him towards that decaying building. Fear warred with this bizarre compulsion. He remembered Anne's terrified face, the chilling emptiness of the room, the wet footprint. Yet, his thumb moved, seemingly of its own volition, pressing accept. What was he doing? The drive back felt different this time. Surreal. The street seemed to twist in unfamiliar ways, landmarks appearing subtly wrong. Time felt syrupy, stretching and contracting. Was he even awake? The haunting images from his nightmares flickered at the edges of his vision, the girl in white, her face obscured, her silent plea. Save me. The whisper seemed louder now, almost tangible, winding around the thrum of the engine, carried on the damp night air. The pull towards the Lotus Inn intensified, a physical sensation now, guiding his hands on the handlebars. He parked the bike, the rusted gates looming like jaws in the dim light. The eerie atmosphere was thicker tonight, if possible. Palpable. He felt watched. He walked down the flickering corridor, the silence pressing in. Room 7. He hesitated, hand raised to knock, the memory of N's fear a cold weight in his stomach. This was insane. He should turn around, leave, report a problem with the order. But the compulsion held him fast. He knocked. The door opened almost immediately. And stood there, wearing a thin coat over her nightgown this time, her eyes widening first in recognition, then in clear, undisguised alarm. Minh. What are you doing here? He held up the bag, the fried rice suddenly feeling absurdly heavy. Delivery. You ordered this? She frowned, shaking her head, confusion warring with wariness. No. I didn't order anything. I was just about to make some tea. She clutched her coat tighter. Why are you back here? The app, Minh stammered, the strange calm beginning to dissolve, replaced by his own returning fear and confusion. They stared at each other, the unspoken questions hanging heavy in the damp air. He glanced past her, into the room. Same small bed against the wall, same university sweatshirt on the hook. Nothing outwardly amiss. But then it started. Faint at first, like static on a bad radio line, then clearer, colder, inside his own head. Under the bed. Look under the bed. Dig. Minh's hands began to tremble. His legs felt leaden, yet they moved, propelling him forward. And gasped, stepping back instinctively as Minh pushed the door fully open and walked into her room without invitation. His eyes felt wrong. Glazed over, unfocused. His face was pale, mask-like. A dreamer walking through a nightmare. Hey. Minh. What's wrong with you? And cried out, her voice sharp with panic. Get out of my room. What are you doing? She grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back, but it was like trying to stop a statue. He didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear her. He walked stiffly towards the small bed, his gaze fixed on the floor beneath it. Dig it up. Now. The internal command was absolute, drowning out everything else. Minh, stop. You're scaring me. And shrieked, desperately tugging at his arm. I'll scream. Get out. He reached the bed, his movements jerky, unnatural. His hands, shaking visibly now, reached down, pulling roughly at the thin floor mat beneath the bed frame. And backed away further, terror blanching her face. Was he crazy? Was he going to hurt her? Don't touch my things. Get out. Help. She scrambled towards the door, fumbling for the handle, intending to flee into the hallway. But Minh was already kneeling, ignoring her completely, his mouth moving silently, whispering words only he, or something else, could hear. His hands groped blindly under the bed frame, across the cold, dusty tile floor. Searching. Feeling for something. Her screams echoed in the narrow hallway, shattering the tense silence just as Minh's fingers brushed against something uneven beneath the loose floorboards. Help was coming, but the true horror was only beginning to stir. Her screams echoed in the narrow hallway, shattering the tense silence just as Minh's fingers brushed against something uneven beneath the loose floorboards. Help was coming, but the true horror was only beginning to stir. The door to the adjacent room creaked open, revealing a middle-aged woman, Mrs. Hoa, peering out cautiously, her face etched with alarm. Seeing Minh kneeling by the bed and cowering near the door, she immediately assumed the worst. Hey. You. What are you doing to that poor girl? She shouted, rushing forward with surprising speed, grabbing Minh firmly by the shoulder. The sudden physical intervention, the sharp voice cutting through the internal static that had gripped him, seemed to short-circuit whatever force held Minh captive. His entire body convulsed, a violent jerk as if electrocuted. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed sideways onto the dusty floor, utterly motionless, the breath leaving him in a whoosh. And gasped, rushing forward despite her fear. Minh. Minh, wake up. Mrs. Hoa knelt beside him, her initial anger replaced by bewildered concern. Good heavens, what's wrong with him? He's white as a sheet. She pressed a hand to his forehead. And ice cold, how strange. Together, with considerable effort, the two women managed to drag Min's limp form onto an small bed. He lay there like a corpse, drenched in cold sweat, his face a ghastly pale mask. And, though still shaken by his bizarre behavior, felt a creeping dread replace her earlier fear of him. Something was terribly wrong here, something far beyond a simple intrusion. They sat on the edge of the bed, watching him, the only sounds the incessant drumming of rain on the windowpane and the slow tick of a cheap wall clock. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Suddenly, Min groaned, his head tossing weakly against the pillow. His eyes remained closed, but his lips began to move, whispering words so faint they were almost inaudible. Dig, under, must dig. And leaned closer, exchanging a frightened glance with Mrs. Hoa. Before either could speak, Min startled again, turning his face sharply to the side. A different sound emerged from his throat now. Not his voice. No, this was deeper, hoarser, thick with an unearthly rasp, like stones grinding together, like the last exhalations of the dying. So cold, can't breathe. The voice grated, filled with an ancient agony. And then Mrs. Hoa froze, eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. Locked, door locked, can't scream. The voice grew more urgent, choked with terror and desperation. Pillow, pillow on my face, no. Don't. It broke on a strangled sob. Alive. I was still alive, the baby too, save my child. The last words were a raw, ragged plea that seemed to tear through the very air in the room, thick with despair and the chilling finality of murder revelation. And felt the blood drain from her face, her hands turning to ice. She gripped Mrs. Hoa's arm, speechless. The older woman stared at Min, her expression a mixture of terror, confusion, and profound pity. Just as suddenly as it began, the alien voice ceased. Min's breathing grew ragged, then slowly evened out. After another long silence, his eyelids fluttered open. He blinked, squinting against the dim yellow light, his eyes clouded with confusion. He looked around the small room, his gaze hazy. A strange mix of smells seemed to hang in the air, faint laundry detergent, damp wood, and something else, metallic, coppery. Like old blood. Long, are you awake? And whispered, her voice trembling. He sat up slowly, groaning, pressing a hand to his head as if warding off a migraine. Where am I? He asked, his own voice returning, though weak and shaky. My room, and replied softly. You passed out. While you were looking for something under my bed. Do you remember? Min's eyes widened slightly. He frowned, concentrating, then shook his head, a look of profound disturbance crossing his features. No. I dreamed. He began, his voice low and hesitant. I dreamed I saw a girl, no face, just hair. She was so cold. He shivered violently despite the stuffy room. Covered in dirt, her hands, full of dirt. Crying like a lost child. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. She took my hand, looked right at me, even without eyes, told me not to let him bury her again. He looked up, his eyes haunted, locking first with Anne's, then Mrs. Hoa's. She said, My child is still alive, please save my child. The connection hit them all simultaneously. The channeled voice. The dream. The plea. Buried alive. With her child. And gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Mrs. Hoa muttered a prayer under her breath. The shared horror was a tangible thing now, settling over them like a shroud. Their gazes, as one, drifted inexorably towards the small, unassuming space beneath the bed. That dusty patch of floorboard suddenly seemed like a gaping wound, hiding an unimaginable secret. The air grew thick, heavy with the presence of unresolved tragedy. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was broken only by the rain and the ticking clock, counting down seconds in a room where time felt broken. Finally, Minh pushed himself fully upright, his hands still trembling but a new, grim determination hardening his eyes. He looked at an if something really happened here, he asked softly, the words catching in his throat, are you afraid? And didn't answer immediately. She stared back at him, her own fear battling with the chilling conviction that they couldn't ignore this. Then, she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Afraid? Yes, she whispered. But, if we do nothing, she'll never rest. Will she? Minh looked towards Mrs. Hoa, an unspoken plea for guidance in his eyes. The older woman sighed, shaking her head slowly. This is beyond us now, children. This needs proper attention. Minh nodded slowly, understanding dawning. Tomorrow, he said, his voice barely audible but firm. Tomorrow, we go to the boarding house management. We have to ask. Ask who lived here before. He looked utterly drained, haunted. You should go back to your room. Rest, and said, her own voice thin. He nodded again, numbly. Stood up unsteadily, mumbled a thank you to Mrs. Hoa, and shuffled out, leaving him alone in the room that now felt like a tomb. As the door closed behind him, and turned to the older woman, her eyes wide with terror. Auntie Hoa. Can I stay with you tonight? I can't. I can't be alone in here. Mrs. Hoa nodded readily, patting her arm. Of course, child. Come. Let's lock this door tight. Even she, pragmatic and down-to-earth, could feel the oppressive weight of sorrow and uncleanness clinging to the very walls of room number 7. Sleep would offer no escape tonight, not for Minh, plagued by visions, nor for An, now terrified of the very floor beneath her feet. The dawn promised not relief, but the daunting task of unearthing a truth buried in darkness. Haunted but resolute, Minh and An met the next morning in the damp corridor outside their rooms, the shared horror forging a grim determination. Sleep had eluded them both, dark circles shadowed An's already pale face, while Minh looked gaunt, his eyes burning with a feverish, haunted light. Their first stop, the Lotus Inn management office, seeking answers buried deep within the building's troubled past. The office was a small, cluttered room smelling faintly of stale cigarettes and dust. A harried-looking woman, Hugh, glanced up from a ledger, her expression wary. Yes. Can I help you? And, finding strength in Minh's presence, stepped forward. We need to ask about room 7. Where I'm staying. There are strange things happening. Hugh's professional smile tightened. Strange things. This is an old building, miss. Pipes rattle, the wind whistles. It's more than that, An insisted, her voice trembling slightly but firm. Nightmares. Whispers. And last night. She faltered, glancing at Minh. Minh spoke then, his voice low but carrying weight. We believe something terrible happened in that room. Before An moved in. We need to know the truth. Hugh shifted uncomfortably, avoiding their intense gazes. She flipped through her worn ledger, stopping at number 7. Look, she sighed, lowering her voice, many students see things, feel things. Especially when they're new, stressed. Please, Minh interrupted, leaning forward. Was there a girl who went missing from that room? About a year ago. Hugh's face paled visibly. She darted a nervous look towards the door. How did you? She took a deep breath. Okay. Yes. There was a couple. Students. The boy, Hoa, was quiet, final year. His girlfriend. I don't recall her name clearly, studied teaching I think. Nice girl, seemed happy. She wrung her hands. Then one day, Hoa comes saying they're checking out. Girlfriend went home, he said. He dropped out, went home too. Paid up, left quickly. We didn't think much of it. But the girl, unpressed, she never actually left, did she? Her family reported her missing later. Hugh nodded reluctantly. Yes. They came asking. Police too. Found nothing. Hoa had vanished. She hesitated, then added almost as an afterthought, funny thing, though. After they left, when we cleaned the room, the floor under the bed. It was scratched up badly. Like something heavy had been dragged across it. Just then, the office door opened and the landlord, Mr. Tu, entered, the same gray-haired, gentle-faced man Minh had seen described in his research of the inn's ownership. Hugh quickly explained the situation, her voice hushed. Mr. Tu listened intently, his brow furrowing as Minh recounted the events of the previous night, the channeled voice, the details of the burial, the plea for the child, his own corroborating dream. Mr. Tu sighed heavily. Injustice casts a long shadow. Unquiet spirits often linger where tragedy strikes, seeking release, seeking truth. He looked gravely at Minh. These visions, they are specific. Too specific for mere nightmares, I fear. He pondered for a moment. The scratches, the missing girl, your experiences. It points to something buried. We must investigate. Tonight. But this requires more than just us. That evening, the air in room 7 felt thick, suffocating. Mr. Tu lit incense, its fragrant smoke curling in the stagnant air, a fragile attempt to ward off the oppressive gloom. Minh held a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dust motes, while An stood near the doorway with Mrs. Hoa, unable to bring herself further inside. Mr. Tu carried a small crowbar and hammer. No one spoke. Minh directed the light under the bed. The floor tiles looked mostly uniform, but in one corner, as Minh had felt the night before, there was a slight unevenness, subtle scratches near the edge as if the tiles had been pried up and reset. Mr. Tu knelt, examining it closely. Here, he murmured. He positioned the crowbar. The first sharp crack as the crowbar bit into the grout echoed like a gunshot in the tense silence. Tile by tile, they worked, revealing the concrete subfloor beneath. Then, Mr. Tu's hammer struck something that yielded slightly, a patch where the concrete looked newer, rougher. He chipped away at it carefully. Minh held the flashlight steady, his heart pounding. A few more strikes, and Mr. Tu stopped, brushing away debris. A gasp escaped him from the doorway. A small piece of fabric, stained a dirty yellow-brown, was embedded in the crumbling concrete. Mr. Tu gently worked it loose with the crowbar's edge. Beneath it, dark strands. Hair. A clump of long, black hair matted with dirt and concrete dust. Oh, sweet mercy. Mrs. Hoa whispered, clutching N's arm. Just then, the single light bulb in the room flickered violently, and died, plunging them into absolute darkness. From the blackness, from the very air around them, a voice whispered, thin and reedy, choked with desperation. My baby, still alive, don't let him, don't bury my baby, and screamed, a pure sound of terror. The lights flickered back on as suddenly as they'd gone out. Mr. Tu stood up, his face grim. Enough. This is a crime scene. Call the police. Now. The arrival of the police brought a semblance of sterile procedure, but couldn't dispel the horror. They documented the initial findings, carefully collected the fabric and hair. Then came the order for a full exhumation of the patch under the bed. Officers used heavy tools to break through the layer of concrete Hoa had poured. As the concrete gave way, a stench rolled out, putrid, sickly sweet, the unmistakable smell of advanced decomposition. It hit them like a physical blow. And wretched, turning away. Even the seasoned officers looked pale. Beneath the concrete was packed earth. A few careful shovelfuls, and then they found her. A sight no one present would ever forget. Curled in the shallow grave lay the decomposed remains of a young woman. Tangled black hair clung to an exposed skull. Her hands, skeletal fingers intertwined, were clasped tightly over her abdomen, a gesture of feudal, maternal protection. She wore the tattered remnants of a white dress, stained dark with blood and grave dirt. Though decay had distorted her features, the rictus of her mouth conveyed unimaginable agony. Suddenly, Minh staggered back as if struck, his eyes glazing over. He collapsed to his knees, not falling, but settling into a strange, cross-legged posture, hands resting on his knees, eyes closed tightly. His body seemed smaller, somehow. Then he spoke. And it wasn't Min's voice. It was a girl's voice, thin, weak, choked with unshed tears and the dust of the grave, yet carrying an incredible weight of sorrow and betrayal. My name was Hien, the voice whispered through Min's lips. I was an accounting student. Second year. I loved him. Hoa. I loved him so much. Tears began to stream down Min's face, though his expression remained strangely blank. He was good, at first. Kind. I trusted him. Then, the baby. The voice broke on a sob that tore at the hearts of everyone listening. He changed. Said it wasn't his. Said I trapped him. We argued, that night, he pushed me. Hard. My head hit the bedpost. The voice grew frantic, reliving the terror. So much blood, but I got up. I pleaded with him. Then, the pillow. Min's body began to tremble violently. Couldn't breathe, struggled, kicked. He held it down, thought I was dead. But I wasn't. Not yet. The final words came out in a devastating whisper, filled with the ultimate horror. He dug, under the bed, buried me. I was still alive. My baby, we died together, down here, in the cold dark. The voice faded. Minh slumped forward, consciousness returning slowly, leaving him gasping and trembling amidst the wreckage of Hien's last moments. The truth was out, buried no longer, staining the air with its horror. But the killer remained free. The hunt had just begun. The voice faded, leaving Minh trembling and the room thick with the stench of death and injustice. The truth was out, buried no longer, but the killer remained free. The horror of Hien's spectral confession hung heavy in the air as the police took charge, their grim professionalism a stark contrast to the raw emotion that had just unfolded. Room 7 became a sealed crime scene, meticulously processed by forensics teams who carefully bagged the fragments of bone, the stained cloth, the matted clumps of hair, the tragic remnants of Nguyen Thi Hien. The official police investigation began immediately, moving from the chilling atmosphere of the Lotus into the sterile environment of labs and precinct offices. Forensic analysis soon confirmed the unthinkable. Dental records, compared against Hien's missing person file from over a year ago, provided a positive victim identification. And the pathologists delivered the final, heartbreaking detail. Examination of the skeletal remains and associated matter confirmed Hien had been several months pregnant at the time of her death. The fragmented whispers Minh had channeled, the dream images of a girl pleading for her child, they weren't delusions. They were echoes of a brutal reality. A cold case, previously stalled by the lack of a body, was now an active, high-priority homicide investigation. All focus shifted to one name, Hoa, the quiet final-year student, Hien's boyfriend, the last person known to occupy room 7 before vanishing. But finding Hoa proved infuriatingly difficult. Detective Trung, the lead investigator assigned to the reopened case, a seasoned officer with little patience for anything beyond hard facts, quickly discovered Hoa had performed a masterful disappearing act. More than a year had passed. Bank accounts closed. Social media profiles deleted. Phone number disconnected. No communication with former classmates or known family members. It was as if Hoa had simply stepped off the face of the earth, leaving behind only the ghost of his former life and the gruesome secret beneath the floorboards of room 7. The trail was ice cold. Weeks blurred into a month. Leads dried up. Frustration mounted within the investigation team. During this time, Minh struggled to reclaim any semblance of normalcy. He and An barely spoke of the horrors they'd witnessed, the shared trauma forming an unspoken, fragile bond between them. But Minh found no peace. Hien wasn't silent. She didn't speak through him again, not like that final, devastating confession. Instead, she haunted his sleep, his waking thoughts, with persistent, fragmented images. Not clear visions, but fleeting glimpses, the cry of seabirds, the smell of salt and sawdust, a specific, recurring pattern on a wrought iron gate, a rough sketch of a house number that seemed meaningless, 117. And the name, or part of one, whispered relentlessly on the edge of his consciousness, 2. Tran Van 2. He didn't know where it came from, why that specific combination of syllables resonated with such chilling insistence. He tried to push it away, terrified of being dragged back into that supernatural vortex, terrified of sounding insane. Yet, the images, the name, they wouldn't leave him alone. Finally, tormented and seeing the official investigation hitting dead ends, Minh hesitantly approached Detective Trung again. He felt foolish, exposed, explaining the persistent dream fragments, the meaningless house number, the name, Tran Van 2, that felt branded onto his brain. Trung listened patiently, his expression unreadable, skepticism warring with the sheer lack of any other viable leads. Supernatural clues. It went against every investigative instinct he possessed. Yet, the kid had been instrumental in finding the body. The details he'd provided before, seemingly channeled from the victim, had proven terrifyingly accurate. What did they have to lose? Reluctantly, Trung authorized a highly unconventional line of inquiry, blending Minh's fragmented clues with standard police procedure. They ran nationwide database searches, cross-referencing the alias Tran Van 2 with Hoa's known physical description and age range. They paid particular attention to residency changes and new ID registrations within the last year, focusing on a hunch prompted by Minh's recurring images of the sea on coastal provinces. Digital forensics teams scoured old, archived data, looking for any faint electronic echo connecting Hoa to anyone named Tuesday. Days turned into another frustrating week. Nothing. Was Minh just traumatized, his mind creating patterns out of grief and fear? Trung was about to shelve the supernatural angle entirely. Then, they got a hit. Not a direct link, but a possibility, flagged by an analyst running geographical cross-references. An individual named Tran Van 2 had registered for temporary residency in Da Nang, a major coastal city, approximately 10 months prior. Age matched. Physical description from the residency application, though basic, was consistent with Hoa's old university ID photo. Occupation listed, carpenter's assistant. The address provided wasn't number 117, but it was on a street known for its small workshops. And Da Nang certainly had plenty of coastline. It was tenuous. Circumstantial. But it was something. Coordination with the Da Nang Police Department was swift. Plainclothes officers conducted discreet surveillance. They obtained a photograph of Tran Van 2 entering a small carpentry workshop near the provided address. When the image was relayed back to Hanoi, Detective Trung felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. Allowing for the passage of time, the slightly different hairstyle, it was him. It was Hoa. He'd found a new life, a new name, hundreds of kilometers away, working with his hands, perhaps trying to shape wood instead of destroying lives. An arrest warrant was issued immediately. Plans were drawn up for a coordinated operation between the Hanoi Task Force and the Da Nang Police. They would move quickly, decisively. Hoa had evaded justice for over a year, hidden beneath a new identity. Anticipation crackled in the air at the Hanoi precinct and echoed in the briefing room in Da Nang. The manhunt was over. Armed with a warrant and guided by clues from both the living and the dead, the police prepared to confront the man who thought he had buried his past. But Hoa's demons, it seemed, had found him first. The confrontation was swift. Armed with a warrant and guided by clues from both the living and the dead, the police prepared to confront the man who thought he had buried his past. But Hoa's demons, it seemed, had found him first. The raid on the small Da Nang carpentry workshop was textbook efficient. Uniformed officers secured the perimeter while Detective Trung and local detectives entered, the smell of sawdust thick in the air. They found him, Hoa, or Tran Van Tu, as he was known here, sanding a piece of timber, seemingly absorbed in his work. He offered no physical resistance when they identified themselves, when the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. None at all. But his eyes, they were vacant, staring past the officers as if focused on something horrific only he could see. He flinched violently when a shadow fell across his face. During the short transport to the Da Nang police headquarters, the cracks in his psyche didn't just show, they gaped wide open. He sat rigidly in the back of the police car, trembling, muttering unintelligibly under his breath. Names, fragments of pleas. Then, he started whimpering. "Stop crying, please, stop crying." He begged the empty air, pressing his hands over his ears. Later, during initial questioning in a sterile interview room, his detachment shattered completely. He suddenly screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the empty space beneath the metal table. "She's there. Looking at me. Get her out. The girl under the bed. Make her stop looking." His eyes rolled wildly, filled with an abject terror that seemed utterly disconnected from the reality of his arrest. It was clear Hoa was profoundly psychologically unstable, haunted by visions far more terrifying than any prison sentence. Given his volatile state and the potential risk he posed to himself or others, the decision was made quickly: solitary confinement in the detention center's isolation wing while awaiting formal transfer back to Hanoi and the inevitable murder charges. Perhaps the investigator subconsciously felt it fitting, let him be alone with the ghosts he'd created. The cell was stark. Concrete floor, bare walls, a thin mattress, a steel toilet. Utterly featureless. Yet, for Hoa, it became a crowded, horrific theater of guilt and torment. His psychological breakdown accelerated catastrophically. He refused all food, swatting away trays pushed through the slot in the door. Sleep was impossible. Guards reported seeing him bolt upright from the mattress at all hours, screaming at unseen terrors. He'd spend hours huddled in a corner, shivering uncontrollably despite the coastal heat, his eyes darting frantically around the empty cell, tracking movements only he perceived. Sometimes he'd whisper Hien's name, over and over, like a desperate, broken mantra. Other times, he'd scream obscenities at the walls, at the ceiling, at the unblinking fluorescent light overhead. The guards grew increasingly unnerved. This wasn't just an act for leniency, this was a man completely unraveling, consumed by a relentless, internal horror. An unusual, persistent cold seemed to emanate from his cell block, making even veteran officers uneasy. The climax arrived on a sweltering Saturday night, deep into the suffocating stillness that precedes dawn. Around 2 a.m., chilling sounds began to echo from Hoa's isolation cell. Not just screaming this time. Something else. A wet, tearing noise. A rhythmic, dull thudding. And worse, interspersed with choked gasps, a sound that might have been laughter, a high-pitched, wheezing, utterly unhinged noise that scraped raw against the nerves of the guards on duty. Two officers, exchanging deeply troubled glances, approached the heavy steel door cautiously. They called out Hoa's name. Silence. Only the faint, wet thump, thump, thump continued. Unlocking the door, hearts pounding, they swung it open. The scene that greeted them would haunt their own nightmares for years. Hoa sat slumped against the far wall in a rapidly spreading pool of his own blood. The source was immediately, sickeningly apparent. He had somehow managed to bite off a significant portion of his own tongue, the mangled muscle lying obscenely on the concrete beside him. Blood frothed from his mouth. But that wasn't the worst. His eyes. Dear God, his eyes were gone. In their place were two deep, ragged, bloody sockets, gouged out by his own fingernails, which were torn and blood-caked. Even as they watched, frozen in horror, his head continued to hit the concrete wall behind him with that sickening, rhythmic thud, splattering blood in arcs across the bare surface, some droplets even reaching the ceiling. He seemed oblivious to the pain, lost in his own private hell. He whispered something, the words thick and distorted by the ruin of his mouth, barely audible above his ragged breathing. "Hien, forgive, please, don't bury me, so cold." Then, a final shudder ran through his frame. The thudding stopped. He slumped further down the wall, leaving a grotesque smear of red. His breathing ceased. His ruined face, impossibly, seemed to settle into a horrifying, twisted grin, a rictus of agony and perhaps some terrible, final understanding. It was as if he had stared directly into the abyss, and the abyss had not only stared back but climbed inside and pulled him down into everlasting darkness. Justice, of a sort, had been served. Not by the courts, but by a chilling, karmic reckoning that defied rational explanation. The formal case against Hoa for the murder of Nguyen Thi Hien and her unborn child was technically closed with the suspect's death, though the evidence collected left no doubt of his guilt. Yet, the gruesome end of the killer offered little comfort, serving instead as a terrifying testament to the power of unresolved injustice and the chilling reality that some secrets, buried beneath cold concrete and layers of denial, refused to stay dead. The horror raised uncomfortable questions, too, about responsibility, about vigilance, about the darkness that can fester unseen in the most ordinary of places, just beneath the surface of everyday life. The man who silenced a life and buried his crime met an end crafted from his own nightmares. Justice, delivered not by a court, but by the echoes of his victim, had been served in the chilling silence of his cell. But for the living, the echoes remained. While the echoes of Hoa's gruesome end faded within prison walls, for the living, the resonance of their encounter with the buried soul lingered, shaping the path ahead. And couldn't stay in room 7. Though Mr. Tu had arranged for monks from a nearby pagoda to perform cleansing rites, and though Hien's tormented spirit seemingly found some measure of peace after her story was finally told, the room itself remained saturated with sorrow and horror for him. Every shadow seemed to hold a memory, every creak of the floorboards beneath the bed a chilling reminder. The Lotus Inn, with its decaying elegance and oppressive atmosphere, was a place she needed to leave far behind. Packing her few belongings felt like shedding a heavy, suffocating shroud. She found a small, simple room in a bustling, anonymous boarding house complex out in Go Vap district, far from the old city center, seeking refuge in noise and normalcy. Life began the slow, arduous process of stitching itself back together. Minh, too, carried the weight of the haunting, the burden of being a conduit for so much pain and otherworldly desperation. He finished his deliveries each night with a bone-deep weariness that had little to do with physical fatigue. He saw Hien's face sometimes in his dreams, but the agony was fading, replaced by a quiet sadness. He focused on his studies, pouring his energy into code and algorithms, trying to rebuild the walls of logic around the inexplicable things he had witnessed. Weeks turned into months. The memory remained, a scar on his psyche, but the raw terror began to recede. Then came the coincidence. Or perhaps, it wasn't coincidence at all. Seeking a slightly larger, quieter room closer to a part-time tutoring gig he'd picked up, Minh found himself exploring options in Go Vap district. Turning a corner in a brightly lit, modern boarding house corridor, looking for the manager's office, he almost bumped straight into an. They both stopped, startled, a jolt of shared recognition passing between them. That instant connection, forged in terror and confusion at the Lotus Inn, flared again, now tinged with awkwardness and the ghost of shared trauma. Minh. She breathed, surprised. You live here?" he asked, equally taken aback. It turned out her room was just down the hall from the one he was considering renting. Fate? Or maybe Hien's final, gentle nudge from beyond. Who could say? He took the room. Their encounters became frequent, unavoidable. At first, they were hesitant, conversations brief, filled with unspoken acknowledgments of the darkness they'd shared. They'd nod politely in the hallway, maybe share a tentative smile at the communal kitchen. But proximity, as it often does, began to erode the barriers. Fire near straw, as the old saying goes. They were two souls uniquely marked by the same harrowing experience, adrift in the vast city. Who else could possibly understand the nightmares that still sometimes woke Minh in a cold sweat, or the lingering chill and occasionally felt even in her new, brightly lit room? Slowly, hesitantly, they began to talk. Shared cups of cheap instant coffee. Late-night study sessions where code sometimes gave way to quiet confessions about lingering fears. They didn't dwell on the horror, not explicitly, but the shared knowledge was always there, an invisible thread binding them together. He saw the strength beneath her initial fragility, she saw the kindness and deep sense of responsibility beneath his haunted weariness. A tentative friendship blossomed, fragile but rooted in an extraordinary understanding. And gradually, inevitably, it deepened into something more. One night, months later, Minh woke suddenly, but not from terror. There was no cold sweat, no pounding heart. Instead, a profound sense of peace filled him. He'd been dreaming of Hien. But she wasn't the tormented apparition from the Lotus Inn, nor the faceless specter from his nightmares. In the dream, she stood before him bathed in soft light, wearing a simple, clean white ao dye, her long hair neatly tied back, her face serene, gentle, finally free from pain. The sorrow was gone from her eyes, replaced by a quiet gratitude. She looked at Minh and smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. "Thank you, Minh," her voice was clear, soft like lotus petals unfolding, carrying no chill, only warmth. "For hearing me. For helping me find rest. I am not cold anymore." Her gaze softened further. "And then, she has a good heart. Gentle, like you. I asked the heavens to let you find happiness together." Minh felt tears welling in his eyes, tears not of fear or sadness, but of overwhelming relief, of release. He tried to speak, to say something, but emotion choked him. Hien simply smiled again, that gentle, luminous smile, before fading slowly, peacefully, like mist dissolving in the morning sun, leaving behind only the faintest, lingering scent of lotus blossoms. He woke fully then, the feeling of peace intensely real. He looked over at Anne, sleeping soundly beside him, her face relaxed in the pre-dawn light. He reached out, gently taking her hand, his heart full. A silent promise formed within him, to live kindly, to cherish this unexpected connection, this fragile new beginning gifted to them, perhaps, by a forgotten soul finally at peace. The dead had found their rest, the wicked had met their retribution. And the living, scarred but not broken, continued their journey, forever changed, carrying the indelible lessons of faith, compassion, and the enduring weight of gratitude. It was a tale steeped in horror, born of betrayal and ending in gruesome death, yet somehow, through the darkness, a quiet light persisted. A light illuminating the enduring power of humanity, the intricate weave of cause and effect, and the profound strength found in sympathy. Because sometimes, the restless dead don't cry out for vengeance, nor do they demand a life for a life. Sometimes, all a ghost truly wants is for the truth to be heard.